Hello, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for joining me. My name is Deontay Cruz. I go by they, them pronouns. I am your host for the podcast, Ending Youth Homelessness. And with me, I have two amazing guests. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves in a moment. We can start to my right. Kiki, could you introduce yourself, name, pronouns, position, and how you're connected with Away Home Washington?
Definitely. Well, as you just heard, my name's Kiki Serantes. I use she and they pronouns. I'm the Training and Engagement Director, and I've actually been with Away Home Washington for almost 2 years in about a week. But I've been a director just since February when our little baby training and engagement department actually became a reality.
Love it. And Anjali, what about you?
My name is Anjali Riddick. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Prevention and Diversion Training Manager, and I'm fairly new with only 5 months on Away Home Washington.
All right. So first question, actually, I'm just going to dive right into it. First question is really targeted towards you, Kiki. You have an interesting sort of vantage point with the training and engagement department that we're launching with your tenure here at Washington. You sort of came in at an interesting time, right into some of the work that we're doing with diversion and prevention. So can you tell folks a little bit about your history with Away Home Washington, when you started, what was your role, and how it's evolved into what it is now?
Yeah, and I'll do my best, but boy, have we been through a lot of changes, and we're still going through a lot of really good, exciting changes since I started. So like I said, I started in October 2020. So it was quite a wild time for us, all in the middle of COVID and everything. And I was brought on specifically to help implement our what was called then the Centralized Diversion Fund, which we have since renamed to our Youth and Young Adult Homelessness Prevention and Diversion Fund. Back then, our whole organization was only 11 people, with me included and Deontay included. We only had we had 3 departments, and this program actually existed inside of our flagship program, the Anchor Community Initiative, which I know we've had a couple discussions on this podcast about before, so I won't go too much into that. But what I will say is that this tool, a centralized diversion fund, or really any flex fund as we see in our model, works really well and is intentionally created as a method and tool for communities to reduce and prevent homelessness in their communities. And so it was originally launched in our first anchor communities, Spokane County, Yakima, Walla Walla, Pierce counties. The fund amount was tied to their actively homeless number. So they had spent a good portion of their time already making their by names list, understanding who was coming into their actively homelessness system. And they identified, a flex fund that would be able to house folks immediately outside of the homelessness system as a key kind of piece of the puzzle. So, and for me personally, having lived experience where a tool like this could have definitely, shortened some of those housing crises in my own life, or with lots of folks I know, I could just see how a flexible tool like this that can both prevent and intervene in a housing crisis can be essential.
Yeah. So started off with the Centralized Diversion Fund, morphed into the Homelessness Prevention and Diversion Fund because it does both prevention and diversion, came out of the Anchor Community Initiative, our flagship program, and is now under the Training and Engagement Department. So let's talk a little bit about that. What is the Training and Engagement Department? How many staff do y'all have? What are the roles and responsibilities?
Well, I'm so glad you asked. As I kind of hinted, we are a brand new department. And since 2018, when our Away Home Washington really started, and the Anchor Community Initiative really started, I don't think any folks knew then. I wasn't here yet, but I don't think any of us knew, how big this would get. But in that short time since 2018, the ACI team, the Anchor Community Initiative team, has been testing out what it takes on the ground in these communities in both rural and more urban settings to try and figure out like what is that kind of secret sauce of what it takes to end youth and young adult homelessness. And that isn't to say that we think we have it all figured out or anything like that, but we do know that there are certain building blocks of this work that we at least have tested out and tried that that does unlock some change at the community level to house young people better than we have in the past. So the training and engagement department comes out of this vision of really wanting to see an entire state that has the ability to house young people in their home community if they want to, without them having to leave to get those resources, right? We want to see a yes to yes Washington where we can house people where they want to be housed. And while our Anchor Community Initiative does take a very like intensive coaching approach, we want to be able to elevate those building blocks, those lessons learned, and those specific attitudes and skill sets across the state. So enter training and engagement. That's where we're heading. We're really trying to create a whole suite of pathways and entry points into our philosophy for ending youth and young adult homelessness. And I will just say, like, the Homelessness Prevention and Diversion Fund is one of those emerging innovations that we tried and tested on the ground in the ACI and are continuing to try and test. But we know there is a lack of shared understanding around how to do housing first for young folks, especially when flex funds are involved, and a need for a lot of our partners in the state to kind of come together and rally around like best practices. And so we moved the HPDF program from the ACI into the training engagement so we can more intentionally build upon those best practices, those recommendations, and ideally see more flex funds pop up all across the state.
So you talked a little bit about the Homelessness Prevention and Diversion Fund under T&E. Right now, you guys are a super team of two. That is growing, I might add. But that homelessness prevention and diversion work is now being carried by Anjali, if I'm correct. And so you have a crucial role in the success of this program. Can you talk a little bit about that, Anjali?
Yeah. So one of my favorite things about the HPDF and having a flexible spending fund is that we are able to center justice and services on our strengths and explore the possibilities and being really creative in housing solutions. I really appreciate the fact that we're able to basically process a fund often within 2 days. So it's immediate, it's low barrier, it's accessible, and it really, really serves the needs outside of like long systems and wait lists and things like that can often like prevent somebody from being housed within the immediate need. So I'm incredibly excited to be part of this team and be part of the work because it truly is a fund that allows us to respond to a need and really truly prevent and divert the experience young people have with homelessness and systems of oppression and marginalized like youth. I don't like that term very much, but it does let us meet those needs.
Yeah. And so as you kind of hinted at, Kiki, we started off with the ACI working with 4 communities. We call them our OG communities. We got Spokane County, Walla Walla County, Yakima County, and Pierce County. Shout out to them because they really sort of led the way. And now we've expanded into 10 counties, 9 communities. And so let's talk a little bit about how many communities at this point, Anjali, are accessing the HPDF.
So right now we have 4 counties that are actively accessing the HPDF fund. We're about to bring on, 5 more.
Yeah, we're doing it in kind of a tiered approach, matching with like the communities. And so I think we have 2 confirmed to launch within the next 6 months.
Okay. I see y'all. And so we don't want to just force that on them. We want to make sure that they're ready to receive that and that they're ready to implement that when they have all the resources and capacity necessary, which I think is smart. Kiki, I have peeped the early stages of the report. It is now out in the world. We kind of worked a little closely on putting it out there. I know the amazing work that you all are doing. I know how many young people have accessed it last year. Can you talk a little bit about how many young people have accessed it this year?
Yeah, and I will say, like, we have a public dashboard, and I think just to call out at the top that we're able to see in real time how this tool is impacting communities on the ground. And our fiscal administrators are just amazing at engaging their communities and constantly trying to improve upon how we're using this tool. And since May 2020, we've housed 720 youth and young adult households. So that's since the program has started. And just from May 2021 to May 2022, we housed 441 youth and young adult households. And I do say it like that because we found that actually a lot of our young folks, this intervention is not only like helping their own stability, but having a ripple effect to other folks in their lives, whether that be their children, whether that be their siblings. And I can actually pull up right now and see on our public dashboard how many young folks were pregnant and parenting upon this, like first receiving this intervention. And that is 32%, close to 32%. And I always think that's a really important number to highlight because pregnant and parenting populations are often like for lack of a better phrase, like an invisible population in youth and young adult work, right? We automatically put those youth and young adults in the family category, right? When they're under the age of 25 and still having those unique needs like we all do, right? And so we are able to kind of disaggregate that and see that as well. And I could go on a whole tangent about all of our data. I will say of that 441% of young folks housed in our report data for this last contract cycle or contract year, 55% of those young folks were young people of color. And I will say of all 441 young folks who were housed, 95% were successfully diverted. 93% of those young folks were still housed 12 months later. And so I think I just want to pause because diversion, it's a housing first intervention. What diversion is what it really is two things, what we're talking about. Creative housing conversations that explore a young person's network and their strengths in order to think creatively about a housing solution outside of coordinated entry. And then providing flexible funds when needed. So the creative housing conversations are the most important part because that might lead to situations where funding isn't needed. And like even in my own story, one of my experiences of homelessness, all it took for that to end was for me to get reconnected with my grandma in a different state, right? And so some of that stuff does happen, but we do know that funds are a crucial piece of getting folks housed. But I do want to draw that distinction because it is just such, we really want to make sure that every single young person is having that conversation, whether or not that flex fund is ultimately provided or not. But usually as a short-term intervention where we're housing people, like Anjali said, the funds are processed in 2 days and folks are housed in about, I think the average length of stay, for lack of a better term, is like 17 days. So what that is telling us is, our program requirement is folks have to be housed within 30 days of the intervention. And it's actually more immediate than that. And getting the check is happening in about 2 days or less. And so I think when people hear this, there's this automatically mistrust of housing first being the setup to fail dynamic. Like, you're just going to give young people money to be housed. And then what about employment? What about mental health? But, what we have found is that you cannot work on those things without a place to sleep when you're actively in survival mode. And the data is here now finally to back up what we have been thinking all along, which is if you actually do house someone right away, it can lead to a longer lasting stability. And our data is showing about, like I said, 93% of young people are still housed at the 12-month mark.
I love that. Yes. And so I think an important thing to sort of hit on is that young people actually know what they need better than systems know what young people need. And so by putting the power back in the young people's hands, we're able to help them better towards the goals that they have to meet the needs that they have, because nobody knows better than the people who are in the situation. But the other thing you did is you touched on two very important things there that I want to sort of back up and talk about. So first, Anjali, can you talk about what housing first means? We touched on that theme, but can you define that for the audience for us?
Yeah, the great thing about Housing First and our model is that the young people don't have to leave the community that they're currently in. So they're being served and being able to access funds and resources within the community they're in. We're able to make sure that they have a safe and stable place to stay within the 30 days with a solid housing plan. And as Kiki said, it's once you have that stability, then you can work on things like employment and education and going to school and other things outside of the needs of just like survival mode. So once you have that safe and stable place, you're able to work on those other things. And really, like, our goal is to make sure that everybody is housed, everybody deserves housing. And then we're working with outside of the homeless systems. So we're also able to, like, again, serve people within their community, meet those needs immediately, and hopefully prevent a night on the street or a night in a shelter, and do that work within real time and real need.
I love that. So everybody deserves housing regardless of the situations that they're battling. And it's a lot harder for folks to actually take care of the other things that they have going on if they don't have housing. It's a major distraction to be out in the streets trying to survive and take care of school and take care of your mental health and take care of getting a job and all these other things. So we at Away Home Washington firmly believe that all young people deserve housing, regardless of what situation that they're going through. And in most cases, the housing actually helps them with all the other situations that they're going through. But the second thing,
can I add to this?
Oh yeah, no, go ahead.
I feel like an important thing that Anjali and I work with folks in the trainings as we're certifying folks on, like, how to have these creative housing conversations and center young people in those conversations, is really getting folks to think differently about what we mean by housing. Because I think a lot of people come to the table with their own perceptions of, like, well, I would never choose to live in that situation, or that would not feel safe for me. And that is fine and valid. But as diversion, its purpose is to move folks along a continuum toward more permanent housing. And so for us, like, a successful diversion is being able to stay somewhere for at least 3 months. But like I said, the data is proving they're able to stay there longer than that. And home and housing is always defined by the young person. And so we see a lot of our fund requests are going to things like move-in costs, rental assistance, application fees, but we get totally outside of the box creative ideas that allow young people to bring their strengths, bring their skills, and really find a housing solution that works for them. And I know we use this one a lot, but one young person had a lot of construction skills, had a family member with an unfinished basement. And, like, after some conversation and some figuring out and a little bit of money to help in the meantime, diversion was able to buy that young person construction tools they needed to maintain employment as well as complete that basement, so they had a place to live. And we even encourage folks to, like, we've seen diversion be used to help young people stay in college when their financial aid didn't come through and their housing was on the line. We've seen young people use it to have to purchase an RV. They had a place to hook it up long term. They had running water, and this was the next step they needed. So I get really excited, and I know Anjali does too, about just the ability to get creative here.
I love that. I love all the creative ways and solutions that we're housing young people, especially when these solutions come from the young people. But I do want to touch back on this other thing you talked about. So you talked about one, that we're having a lot of success with the HPDF in the communities that it is operating, but also there are other programs operating. And not to say that, like, HPDF is the answer, but we know that we have some good outcomes when compared to some of the more traditional outcomes. And for the folks who are watching this is your cue. Go check out the report. Go on our social media, sign up for our mailing list, get on that, get that report delivered directly to you. But for the folks who haven't seen that, Kiki, can you talk a little bit about how some of these outcomes stack up against traditional housing models, especially with the cost savings? Like, for me, that is such a huge thing.
Yeah, 100%. And I do, before I jump in, want to acknowledge that our philosophy at Away Home Washington and with the Anchor community is we need to have a whole suite of program types and services that a young person can choose from to meet where they're at. Some people do need permanent supportive housing. Some people do need transitional living and longer term support. And sometimes like a light touch intervention like how like this doesn't make sense. But because this is such a newer intervention in the whole landscape of youth work, at least since I've been here, I've only seen these kinds of things starting to pop up in like the last decade, the entire time I've been working in it. But, but still, they've really advanced in even just that time. And so it does it. So what diversion does, what these creative housing conversations do, they're driven by the young person, and we go through a series of engaging the young person, setting up a dynamic as a thought partner. So like making sure that we are very clearly not telling them what to do, but we're here to ask questions and whatnot. And then we spend a whole bunch of time actually creating like eco maps with young folks and having conversations and training people to have conversations that really answer the question, like, who would be upset if they knew you were here tonight, and building in plan A, plan B, and plan C around that. And so what it does is it effectively diverts or prevents someone from going into our HMIS, or homelessness management information system. It's like the way that folks are able to track homelessness in their communities. And it does flip the traditional like culture on its head, like where I think we all on here have experience in traditional youth work, where the adults in the room have all the answers, and we're like, well, you're only 21 and your brain's not fully developed, so actually you should try this out instead. But like you pointed out, Deontay, or I should say Ben, like you pointed out, Deontay, like only people who are like, we know what we need ourselves best, people in that experience. And the same is true for young people. And now with 2 years of data, we are able to see it more effectively in the communities that we serve, how that works. And I know I've been talking a lot, but the other key component, this isn't just a diversion program, it's a centralized program. And so it's not just like a fund that exists at one nonprofit in a county and then people have to get referred to it. No. We also flip that on its head, that traditional referral system. And we train a broad intersecting group of people in these counties. You don't have to have any formal title. We have everything from youth advisory board members, immigrant right council folks, tribal members, and then your more like obvious like homeless youth providers, schools folks, those kind of folks who are trained and actively having these conversations and using these funds with young folks. And the philosophy behind that is that young people are able to access what they need and hear about this fund with the people they trust, where they're already going, and who they feel comfortable with. Because anytime you refer someone through another program, that's just another opportunity to lose them and never hear from them again.
Ooh. And I just want to add that the greatest thing about the HPDF or having a flexible spending fund is that we really honor that people need different things, people want different things, and we don't have a one size fits all, a cookie cutter model. We're able to really, like Kiki said, like find out what the youth needs and their mind and their perception and what works for them, and really be able to make that happen. It's 100% youth driven. And that's just incredibly cool because it empowers young people to know that they matter, that they have control over their lives and they're being supported. And we're here to make that happen with their vision in mind.
Yes, I love that. We are here to make that happen because it takes a village. So let's talk about that. You talked about it a little bit, Kiki, but who are y'all working with? I know that we're working with OHY to get into the communities. OHY, the Office of Homeless Youth, housed in the Chamber of Commerce. You're also working with folks in the communities where HPDF is currently operating. Who are some of those folks and what does that relationship look like?
Yeah, so I will say this fund is made possible through our funders, the Office of Homeless Youth, and our private funders, the Schultz Family Foundation. And even in just the 2 years, we've had some even solo, like anonymous donors, like donate on the community level because they can see like the impact that this is having. And we do partner really closely with the Office of Homeless Youth when this was first starting to like craft it, right? And then now, in terms of where it's at, like we said, it's in our 4 original anchor communities. So that's Spokane, Walla Walla, Yakima, and Pierce. But next up, Clark County just identified their fiscal administrator. So we're looking to see them launch by the end of the year. Hopefully we can see that first request come in. And then I don't want to put any more pressure on the other anchor communities because there's a couple more that we see, a couple more counties that we see launching. And so I do want to clarify that the HPDF is a program that exists very explicitly within our anchor communities because it is tied to being the by names list and being able to actively like reduce and end youth and young adult homelessness. But this work has inspired a whole other host of work in the state around this and in more partnerships. And so we are excited to continue exploring like flex funds. And we recently received a grant to help kind of scope up this type of work for a specific population, folks exiting systems of care into youth and young adult homelessness. So we're partnering very closely with Building Changes, who I have to just give a shout out to because Building Changes worked with Africa Town to actually create the first ever centralized diversion fund in our state that really helped lay a lot of the foundations we were able to build upon. So it's really a beautiful thing that our 2 organizations are coming together now to kind of think creatively about how we can create and elevate the best practices we've learned and really make sure that young people are not exiting from systems of care. So that's child welfare, juvenile rehabilitation, behavioral health, into homelessness. And I have to say, I don't know if folks know, but something like a third of young folks from most of these systems will experience homelessness after exiting, something between like a fourth and a third. So we're really excited to kind of be able to continue using our learnings in like targeted ways like this going forward.
I love that. I love the idea of being able to break down those invisible barriers across counties and communities to be able to sort of implement whatever resources we need around the state to see homelessness end in our state as opposed to specific counties. So shout out to all the folks who have pioneered, you know, a resource like the Centralized Diversion Fund before us, who have allowed us to be able to learn and build on top of that, for folks like Kiki and Anjali to be able to take those learnings and then implement those in our communities. And shout out to the folks who are in the communities doing the great work every day in the ground, and the young people who stay resilient, who continue to prove that they know exactly what it is that they need and continue to go out and get it, despite the fact that sometimes the systems don't allow them to. But we are here for that. And so let's talk a little bit about what you guys got going on in the next year. You guys got some exciting things coming up here in the near future. Department Training and Engagement is launching. We like to call it T&E for short. And, you know, some big things happening within the next year as we're expanding. We've more than doubled the number of young people we've served with the HPDF within the last year. Who knows? Maybe that number will double again. But talk what do you guys got planned? What's going on? Let the folks know.
Yeah. Anjali, do you want to talk about some of the upcoming stuff in HPDF? Then I can take a broader view at like the T&E as a whole. Maybe we could do that way.
Sure. Well, one thing we have coming up next week is we've got a learning circle for the providers, and we will be focusing on talking about sexual orientation and gender identity data collection, because we know that those folks are disproportionately affected by systems. And we want to make sure that because we have such a low barrier, easily accessible and quickly accessible fund, that those are the folks that are able to access them. We serve a lot of communities where we want to make sure that that we're able to collect that data accurately and make sure that they're represented. And we want to make sure that those are the folks that we're serving and learning from our data. So we really want to be able to explore what's going on, respond to what's going on, and have solutions that we're figuring out with the communities that we're serving.
I love it.
Yeah, and I will say Anjali has been like offering regular statewide trainings, and we do have another one coming up, but it is already full. We already got over 60 folks signed up, but Anjali already has ones planned out for the rest. So I really encourage people, if you are in one of those counties we mentioned and you're like, I want to go and be able to access this fund, Anjali is the person you want to reach out to on that. And it's not, like we know that queer folks and young people of color this tool works particularly well for those young folks. And I'm a firm believer that is because we're bypassing the systems that have done them harm, that we're not forcing them to go into a housing program where they have all these rules that aren't culturally responsive or sensitive or any of that, right? And then we are punishing them when they don't fit into a mold that was never meant for them to fit into. This is instead something that allows someone to never have to interact with whatever that system is. And like I say, they can have these conversations, especially now that we've been active for so long. We have over 200 providers or more trained in each of these counties from across sectors where that is able to happen. So I will say we have another, our training and engagement department as a whole, we are getting ready to officially launch our statewide technical assistance that will really pick up in 2023. So what is statewide technical assistance, you might ask? Those are basically just the trainings, webinars, resources, toolkits, and other consultation resources that we are working on providing to elevate the building blocks of our work, whether that be best practices around this flex funds or case conferencing or setting up a by names list, or, what we do in every single day, and we're striving to do better every single day, which is center solutions from young people and listen to what young people are telling us and act on that. So this event is November 9th, Wednesday from 1 to 2:30, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about the theory of change behind our department, like why are we doing this thing, and some things to look forward to in the next 6 months. There will be an opportunity for you to sign up for a list, so to speak, so you can stay in the loop on all of these training opportunities that we have unfolding in the near future.
All right. Second to last question we got going on. So if folks want to know more about the training and engagement work happening in the next year, or if folks are out in the anchor communities and they're like, oh my goodness, this HPDF sounds like an amazing thing, how can they get in contact with y'all to learn more?
Well, I'm super excited. We just set a hpdf@awayhomewashington.org email address. So if you forget any of our names, just remember HPDF and Away Home Washington, and you'll be able to get in touch with us. But for more direct questions, you can definitely about our statewide technical assistance and training and engagement. That's me. Anjali is your go-to for HPDF. And I don't know if you have anything else you want to add to that, Anjali.
And this is my shameless communications plug. Follow us on social media, get on our mailing list, get our newsletters, get the info sent directly to your inbox. Go to our website, which is horrible and we're revamping. So we should have a new one within the next year, but it's going to be dope. Stay up to date on all the amazing work that's happening with the Training and Engagement Department, with the Homelessness Prevention and Diversion Fund, with the Anchor Community Initiative, with the Way Home Washington as a whole, with all of our partners around the state and all of our partners around the country who are doing amazing things to reduce and ultimately end homelessness for a myriad of different populations. And so now that we're wrapping up, I always love to show love to folks. So this is your opportunity. Is there a resource that folks should know about? Is there an organization out in the community that is doing amazing work? Let the people know. Sprinkle that sauce on their name. Go ahead.
I have to give a shout out again to Building Changes, who really laid such a solid like really brought the centralized diversion fund model and piloted that like in our state. And then just working with y'all through this partnership, you know, they are mission driven to very similarly, and they focus on education, health, and school and housing needs for families and students. So yeah, I would definitely check them out, and don't be surprised if you see us working together again, because it's been awesome.
I have to give a small shout out, or big shout out. I don't know, a shout out. Sorry, that was awkward. A shout out to our fiscal admins who do amazing work and work with all of our providers. And they do so much work in processing all the requests that's come in and help with eligibility requirements. They are so awesome and on top of it. And I just have all the love to send out to our homeless prevention and fund admins.
And we could call them out. That's Volunteers of America in Spokane, Blue Mountain Community Foundation, who has a really close partnership with Blue Mountain Action Council in Walla Walla, Yakima Neighborhood Health Services in Yakima, Comprehensive Life Service Resources in Pierce, and then our newest one in Clark is Council for the Homeless. So because of y'all and your ability to be there for your community to access this fund, that is the whole reason. We're up here at the state level, but that is the reason why we are seeing what we're seeing. So thanks for calling that into this space, Anjali, because you're so right.
I love it. Shout out to all the dope people in the communities doing the work, holding it down. It truly takes a village, and we are one state. So this is Away Home Washington. We are signing off, ending youth homelessness. Join us next time for our podcast. Thank you.
Bye.